Here we go, episode 191 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. We're your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore, with Kyle, Jesse, and Kyle. It's tournament week. It is the St. Johns River Bassmaster Elite, kicking off the Elite Series season 2025. And man, it's a familiar place. Couple little twists and turns, and obviously a new season always has some highly anticipated moments in it for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think I speak for everybody in saying that the first couple tournaments of the year, you get ramped up. Obviously, the excitement is in the building, it's in the air. Going to a tackle store down the road, people know it's coming. Inside this building here at Bass, obviously, people are jacked up. I know it's the same way there at JM. So many new things going on that I'm a little anxious at all the new stuff, but it's going to be super fun. It's going to be really enjoy. Hopefully, the fans enjoy it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's obviously
It's
priority.
early. We're shooting this podcast early Monday morning so we can get it out there on social and to the fans for their fantasy picks early. So forgive us
That's
a little
exactly
bit.
right.
I mean, we had our last weekend before the Elite Series, and we actually had the weekend, Kyle, because Rayburn turned into a 1 day event for the Open. So just forgive us for being a little bit tired on Monday morning.
That tournament basically perfectly depicted like how everything's gone, and it's just chaos. Everything's just complete chaos. And then, obviously an open that everybody, myself included, was looking forward to. Some bad weather, unfortunate deal, but obviously Mother Nature will do that to you a lot of times, especially on those big bodies of water like Rayburn. You'll get that. Hopefully, fingers crossed, though, St. John's River and Okeechobee, we're just gonna smooth sail for 2 weeks and have two great events, and let's get it going, boys.
Well, I'll say the weather down in Palatka, Florida, for it being cold a month ago when the Harris Chain event got postponed and delayed to just one event or 1 day for the college series. Uh, since then, it has been very stable and pretty darn warm. So it should be a warmer type St. John's event than we've seen in the past. We had a little bit of a cool down the last day and a half or so. I think yesterday's weather, very similar in the 50s, lows in the 40s. Today, highs in the 60s, lows in the 40s tonight. Then we have 73, 51 for Tuesday's high and low. Wednesday's is the off day is 62 and 44. The lows start to creep down big time, though. And instead of it being a warming trend, it does look like it's going to get a little cold those first 2 days, 59 and 31. 54, 37, and then the weekend hits mid to upper 60s and mid to upper 40s. So, not the best low temperatures that you want to see in Florida, but we do have some highs in the temperatures you'd want and some mostly sunny, which is partly cloudy. That'll be the hill I die on forever. I need a meteorologist to join us on the podcast. What's the difference in mostly sunny and partly cloudy? That is the same thing said two different ways. That is cup half full, cup half empty, and type of deal. Mostly cloudy. That would be partly sunny, right, Kyle? So whatever you choose to say, that's what we can say. But temperatures in the 50s to 60s in the tournament. They should get some active fish with some warmer temperatures during the practice period. But I'll say, with it being pretty stable over the last couple of weeks, it probably takes a day or two for these fish to even feel it. And so if you only have like a 2 day cold trend, they're not even really feeling it until it starts warming back up again. So ideally, they are unaffected. It is shallower. It is higher water levels than before. So we'll see how the St. John's plays out. But on today's episode of the podcast, we will go into our Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing teams, our Falcon Lake Falcon Rods, not Falcon Lake. I wish we were going there. Falcon Rods Drain the Lake Challenge, and then we'll also do our TH Marine Pick'em that we kind of outlined a few weeks ago, and how it'll go this time around. So, Kyle, you got anything to say? Any thoughts about the St. Johns River before we get into picking our teams and whatnot?
I don't. I mean, I'm really excited for the tournament. Obviously, we've already went over that, but we've already talked about it on the previous episode of the podcast. Rodman being off limits.
Yep,
Obviously, that's something you
absolutely.
want to keep in mind. That lake historically over the last few years we've been there has kind of prevailed to be one of the places you can go and do the scope deal. Timber off the bank, a lot of fish suspended, but it looks like that's going to be less of a factor. You would think on paper, you never really know. It's too early on in practice as we're shooting this to really have a good feel for like what guys are doing. Like we're just a little unsure at this point. But definitely something to keep in mind. I say this every single time we shoot a podcast over the St. Johns River, which has been, a few times now, other than maybe last year being as late as it was in the year. Like everybody just cross your fingers. We get another 2019 where somehow miraculously the weather warms up, you get that warming trend, those fish start moving up, and we start seeing some of those giants that, Walters, Rick Clunn, the Johnson brothers, Lee Livesey. Like that tournament is like what the St. Johns River can be. And you know how good it is just because of the giant bass that get caught from all different parts of, the fishery. It's not like it's just one lake or one area that catches them. Like Crescent a lot of times is really good. You can fish the main river and it be really good. You can do a little bit of everything and have a really good chance of success. So that's what I'm rooting for. Like you said, definitely going to be some cooler temps in the morning, but afternoon wise, hopefully we get that warmer weather. Stable. I mean, that's number one key is stable of any sort. And I think that you'll see a little bit of everything, right? You'll see some spawning, some pre-spawn, maybe some shell beds. We've seen guys do well on those kind of things in the past. I mean, it really will provide a lot of opportunities for our anglers to do a lot of different things, and it's going to be interesting to see what technique prevails.
Yeah, I think that when you think about the St. Johns River, that 2019 event, that was a couple of combinations of things. You had that huge warm up that happened during the tournament. It was like afternoon of day one, you started to see it, and then day two, three, and four were just huge days. If we would have had warm weather a few hours earlier on day one, we probably break 100 because Rick Clunn had 98 and change for his 4 days. Huge final day. But when we think about the warm weather coming in, that's the huge depending factor on if this tournament is a 77-pound weight or an 84-pound weight, or if it breaks 90 pounds. If it's in that 75 to 82-pound range, that 7-pound range, that is the normal weight we expect to see at the St. Johns River for 4 days when it's not the best weather conditions, when it is warming up at the right time, and they do flood to the whatever cover there is for these fish, because that was a huge thing in 2019. We went back after 3 years and a lot of the eelgrass was gone. A lot of the reed heads were limited down. And so all of a sudden you had this huge wave of fish moving up to spawn, and they only had limited places to go, so it was just easy to pick them off. It's kind of like fishing on low tide. They only could be certain places, so you roll up there and you bust them, and it's absolutely magical. So hopefully there's more cover and structure, vegetation, reeds, whatever that might be, in the St. Johns River from now going forward, lily pads. But the deal is with higher water, that's harder to keep that vegetation healthier. That water really prevents sunlight from getting there, slows the growing process of the grass. It's the same conversation we'll have next week about Okeechobee. Higher water levels, even if grass exists, it's not thriving. Water levels need to drop a little bit for that grass to really get thick and strong, and for that water level to rise back up where it's fishable. But we will see about that. Like you said, some shell bar stuff for sure. I think those places where those fish can get up on top of the shell bars, shallower, or you can fish off the drop of them in the river. Those turns in the river where the shell bars kind of peak up and then flatten off, and then you have lily pads all, littered on the bank. I would expect some of that in between stuff to be good early in the mornings for these fish that aren't necessarily up there sunning. It's still low light, all those different things. I'd expect a really good canal bite. I really expect, the Dunn's Creek region, the Willaca region. Who knows if the Salt Springs areas start to pump out fish like we have seen them in the past, all those different springs that pop off of Lake George and the St. Johns River. But those canals, dead end canals, the docks, those are just places that hold fish, especially with more water being in there. Sometimes they're too shallow and you kind of muck it up in the middle. If they're a little bit water, if the water level is a little bit higher like we expect it to be, a lot of those canals will have more water, able to fish more effectively, hold more fish. And when the sun comes up and it kind of warms in the afternoons, those fish start to do their deal quicker in Florida. And we know that. We've seen that some places those fish hang out for a couple weeks and spawn. Sometimes those fish will get up there, by noon in Florida, and they're done by 6 p.m. They've done their deal and they pull back off and they're not there tomorrow. and it's not like they started and stopped. It's they got through with it. So let's get into some fantasy picks. One other news note and nugget I'm not going to take away from the TNZ podcast, but something to mention. Such told me last week about it, and he wrote a story. It's on bassmaster.com right now. Check it out. If you're considering Mike Iaconelli for Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing or Drain the Lake, have some caution because it seems like about the week before the Elite Series season starts, uh, he goes to ratchet down his boat straps on a lake near his house, and he said, ratcheting down the third ratchet, something in his elbow popped. He went to the doctors. Such said that it went in for an X-ray, and they didn't find anything. And I said, well, Such, if he tore a muscle, you'd never find it on an X-ray. It's only on an MRI. Those are X-rays are bones, MRI is muscles. So he said, yeah, they went and got an MRI, and they think that he tore possibly his bicep, and so he's got Mr. Roboto, big arm brace that he's going to try to fish with. We will see. But if he is a Wednesday scratch for this tournament, don't say someone didn't warn you. We are warning you here on the Inside Bassmaster podcast. Iaconelli could be a late scratch for not only the season, but could be a late scratch for the St. Johns River this week. So we'll keep an eye on that. It'd be hard pressed to think that if he can't go St. John's, that he'd be able to go next week for Okeechobee. I feel like it's an all or nothing thing. So we'll see about Ike's
And
injury prognosis.
and that's a tough deal. I mean, obviously, you want to give.
It's his
We do
right
every
arm as well. It's his right
we
arm as well.
Right. Well, I was even going to say, like, even beyond that, like, we do everything we can to send out an email if you have him picked, just to give you a heads up. But, like, based on the story, it's going to be like a game time decision. I mean, just like a, NBA starting five. Like, we're not going to know really, I guess, until sounds like the day before. So, like
Which is
Ronnie said,
what I think. I think Mark Menendez did that to us when we had an off day at Eufaula when the Elite Series revamped and started back up in 2020 during COVID. He he messed up his back on like a big crankbait cast, like the last hour of practice, and no one knew. And Such still talks about it to this day that he had him on his fantasy team, and so yes, like you said, could be a late scratch. Keep an eye out for some kind of news. And Kyle, even if there's not a full blown story, can you give a brother a heads up somehow if you hear
oh, I
they're
mean,
in person?
yeah, I mean, I'll certainly let everybody know. But I mean, the hierarchy of letting people know things is usually all over the place. I think, like I said, we do the best we can to let everybody know in the appropriate order. But yeah, it's hard to get that kind of news out there when you've got less than 24 hours to basically publish it. But yeah, we'll certainly have a story, and then we'll let everybody know as soon as we can on that. So keep an eye on it, like Ronnie said.
Well, let's just jump into it. Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing. The buckets are set. We've got some rookies dispersed. This year's rookies dispersed throughout the different buckets. Obviously, you've got. I think in the past we've done it based on like career winnings on how we do it. So like seeing Cody Meyer in bucket A is not surprising. I think Dakota Eber is probably in bucket B or C. Where's Dakota? Where'd you
Uh,
shove Dakota?
Dakota actually might be
You
in.
put him in bucket E. That's a steal. Okay, we'll get into that. But anyways, they should be dispersed throughout. Cody Meyer, I see him in bucket A. Um, we maybe see some other people mixed in as well. So
There's
keep an
two
eye
there's
on that.
two rookies per bucket until bucket E, and then there's a handful more
Oh, I
in
see
bucket E.
Easton.
But
Yeah,
there's
Easton in
two.
bucket A. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. The top two in tackle warehouse EQ points per bucket, A, B, C, D, and then E obviously has more than two. So that's how we split it up. If you don't like it, tough. Everybody's got the same ability to pick whoever they want. So I don't want to hear about it.
Well, and then it looks like bucket B has Randy Howell and Tucker Smith, which
That includes
Randy's not a rookie, but he's new to
Yeah,
the Elite
that
Series
includes
this
all
year.
the
Yes.
new guys. So Cliff
And
Pace,
then
obviously.
yeah, Pace is in bucket C with the likes of Paul Marks. Bucket D, we've got um, Andrew Loberg and Emil Wagner, and then bucket E, everyone else. So Bo Browning, Blake Capps, Dakota Ebear, Evan Kung. That's it. So cool. let's get into it. And then the rest of them are based off of AOY standings from 2024. If you're in the top 18 in points, obviously, if we're doing two new guys per bucket, basically, top 18 in points will get you in bucket A from last season. So I'm going to go through and pick my buckets real quick. We'll go through all five and then we'll explain through there. So bucket A, I've got Brandon Lester. Obviously, we'll get into explaining that, but bucket B, Pat Schlapper. Bucket C, Luke Palmer. Bucket D, Brandon Card, and bucket E, Jake Whitaker. So bucket A, let's hear your fives then. Sorry, I'm rusty
Yeah.
on this.
So I'm going a little mixture of like high percentage, low percentage, kind of something that I normally do. Bucket A, Chris Johnston. Bucket B, Wes Logan. Bucket C, Greg Hackney. Bucket D, Mark Menendez. And bucket E, Bo Browning. For no reason other than I just want to pick Bo Browning in fantasy fishing. And if he proves me wrong, then he'll never get picked again.
Hey, I picked him in our rookie story, saying that I expect him to be our rookie of the year leader after the St. John's. So I expect him to at least be the highest rookie. We'll see. Brandon Lester, bucket A for me. I picked him before there were really any percentages formed, like I picked him so early that the percentages were moot, but he's at 3%. Man, Brandon's record, I think he's got like 25 tournaments in the state of Florida and 13 top 25s. It's so hard to be consistent in Florida. Even if you narrow it down to the St. John's, I think he's had one bad finish at the St. John's and everything else was great, top 25-esque. So Brandon Lester just rock solid. He returned to form like we expect after a tough 2023. He was back in form 2024 in bucket A where we expect. Florida fits his style. St. John's River is a combination of that, a little bit offshore, able to fish with your electronics if you want, but then also everything else you'd expect, shallow water fishing, cypress trees in places, lily pads otherwise, a stickworm, which is Brandon Lester's best friend a lot of the times, no matter how you rig it. And so I think Brandon Lester just got to get me started, Kyle. I got to get me a good guy out of the gate. Obviously, we know last year's schedule, quite a few with smallmouth lakes, with Smith Lake. There was a lot of forward-facing sonar excellence at the top of the AOY race. And so I'm not just trying to pick young guys on an old school fishery like the St. John's. I got to find some mixture. Patrick Walters is going to be an eye that people put a lot of thought into. Chris and Corey Johnston. Everybody else really relatively unproven on the St. John's. So I'm going with the sure thing, which there are no sure things in fishing, but the most sure thing, Brandon Lester and bucket A.
I like that pick. Obviously, bucket A, if you look at it, there's like five anglers that are making up like 75% of the picks in that bucket. So it is a good opportunity if you want to take a risk in bucket A. Some really, really big time hammers in there. Jay Shakurit. Obviously, like you said, with Brandon Lester, Chris Zaldane, some
Adding
really, really,
Cody and Easton in there.
yeah, really, really incredible anglers in there at, sub 3%. But for me, I'm going Chris Johnston. Just consistent. I mean, consistent at the St. John's River. You look at Corey's got 21% in bucket A. Typically, when the Johnston brothers are in play and you're going to pick one or the other, I almost always just pick the lower of the two, just playing the odds because I feel like they're so consistent at the same clip. It's very rare that one brother has a lot of success on one body of water and then the other one doesn't. I mean, they've both done extremely well. Corey obviously getting the win last year. I'm going to say this. I think that at the St. John's River last year, I mean, this is not like a big secret. I think Chris kind of aided Corey in a way. I think he definitely let off a lot of his stuff, which allowed Corey to, have more area, more, fish. I mean, essentially that were on bed and things of that nature. And I think that first tournament of the season, I don't think there's any of that going on. I think it's head to head Corey versus Chris, and whoever wins wins. And I'm not saying that those two are going to win the tournament, but I think those two, have been so good at the St. John's River. It's hard to root against them based on their success. And 11.7%, I'll take it for Chris Johnston in bucket A. And I'll go ahead and move us on to bucket B. So again, I kind of always go with this theme of like I'll take a couple high percentage and take a couple low percentage. Very surprising to me. I understand John Cox, Drew Benton are in bucket B. I hope like crazy those guys are reeling in 8 to 10 pounders off bed. And, Drew Benton has, another one of those amazing canal catches like he did back in, I want to say that was 19, maybe the first day of the event. I hope we see a
He
lot
even
of
had a
that.
big one last year on day 4. He had like a six and
Yeah,
a half
ab-
pounder in the
absolutely.
canal.
Don't get me wrong. I hope we see a ton of that. I hope that is just like Bass Live is full of just giant catches. However, I will say Wes Logan is incredibly consistent at the St. John's. Not like he's always reeling in top tens, but for me, I'll look at the math here. I obviously did the research on it. Wes Logan has
It's like point 0.7 or something.
never finished worse than 32nd. So he's in what, 4 Elite Series trips. He's finished somewhere in the basically in the top 30 every single time. I mean, for me anymore, just to get the season started, I just want a little bit of consistency. I don't want any tanks. Let's just have some guys make the 50 cut and let's see what happens. So I'm going Wes Logan and Bucket B.
Hey, he popped up on camera last year as well, and I think he had the conversation with John Cruz about like I don't think he said this place is title, or but it was like I'm not even thinking about the tide, and so
Yeah,
maybe he considers it a little bit and has gotten even better than he was in this body of water.
I've actually talked to him about that exact thing because I do remember John Cruz on our podcast was telling us about that story
How
of.
even if it's slight, it matters at
Yeah.
times.
And,
Yeah.
and he had brought up the story of how Wes was like, when they talked in the water, he's like, yeah, I'm not even paying attention to it. And he's still catching them there. So, I mean, the more times you go to a body of water, especially one that you've already had success, you start putting those pieces of the puzzle together and definitely become deadly. So Wes Logan at 0.7%, not even a percent. I mean, like I'll take my odds there, boys. I'll take them.
It is a loaded bucket, and I it's so hard to pick Drew Benton or Drew Cook or John Cox. Even Stetson Blaylock has had great finishes here. Matt Arias had great finishes here. And so when you think about those five guys, you're just like, which one do you choose? And then you end up hating yourself because you picked the wrong one out of the five. You pick the guy who doesn't get it dialed in. So I kind of just avoided those guys in general because I'm not quite sure which ones it's going to lend to. John Cox has done well there every year, but John Cox has fished a different place on the St. Johns River every time. And I have no idea if he's going to do something crazy, if he's going to go back to somewhere and make a long run, less fishing time. Like, I'm not sure. I don't know what the water level does to certain areas. They would know if it's going to expose some areas. And so they end up becoming the favorites because Cliff Prince isn't in our field this year. So they end up becoming the most seasoned favorites. So hard for me to pick them. I just kind of gotta, I'm just gonna watch that, I'm just gonna watch that knife fight go on over there, and my fighter's not in that knife fight. I've got Pat Schlopper. I feel like he did well at Seminole. I feel like he's done well randomly at some events like this, with this being a different kind of event for Midwesterners. Not all of them do great, but this is a place you can do well. Bob Downey's done well here. Seth Feider's done well here. There's different times that these guys have done well. And so I feel like this time, Pat Schlopper, especially if some of the fish pull off because it is a little bit colder in at the start of the tournament. Um, that's the one thing we got to keep an eye on for me. Hasn't had a great track record here in his couple finishes. He's been in the 50s to the 80th, but I expect this to be one that he makes the cut in. I just had a feeling when I was scanning down the list, unless you went with the shoe-in favorites, you kind of just, this is a wide open bucket other than a couple people. And so I'm going Pat Schlopper. No real rhyme or reason except for there's always a Midwesterner who ends up doing well, and I think that it could be him this time around. Let's get to bucket C. I've got a guy that's very similar type fisherman as your pick. You picked Greg Hackney. I picked Luke Palmer. Luke Palmer won at the Santee Cooper Lakes, fishing similar styles. Loves this type of fishing. I could see him really doing well here to kick off the year, whether it was sight fishing or just fishing the cover, the structure available to him. He's been here enough now that he should not be worried about travel distances, and like he knows what to do at the St. Johns River. So I would lean with Luke Palmer. at the moment for bucket C for me. I'm not really picking based on percentages like you said and like I said. I picked my team so early, percentages weren't even really formed. I think when I clicked someone, I made him go up 0.1% because I was still so early in the process. But he's under 2%, and this is right up his alley. I mean, these first two events are right up his alley, and I wouldn't put it past him to have a great event here. So Luke Palmer, bucket C for me.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Hackney, do I really need to explain that one? I feel like that's
Nope.
a pretty self-explanatory pick.
He was one
Uh,
of my picks in the live well. I picked Lester and Hackney as ones to watch, which if you haven't seen the live well, you'll see this podcast. Just know I shot the live well before this podcast at the Screen and Knowledge with Tommy, and I mentioned one of my picks, and then Greg Hackney's going to get picked by everybody. So
I think Greg Hackney is going to punish the first fish that bites on day one. Like I'm talking like punish. And I think that he's going to do a lot of that throughout this tournament. I think he's going to do a lot of that throughout the first 2 weeks in Florida. And frankly, I think he's going to do a lot of that throughout the season. I know you and I talked about him the last podcast we did. I mean, if I'm going to talk the talk, I'm going to walk the walk. If I think Greg Hackney's going to have a big season, then I'm going with him right out of the gates in bucket C. Now, sticking with the trend of a little old school, right? A little bit of consistency. I'm going Mark Menendez in bucket D. And you know what? I've covered Mark Menendez on the water at the St. Johns River. He fishes the exact same stretch basically every single time we go there, and he seems to catch them every single time. There's just something about the St. Johns River, especially when you exclude Rodman, right? I mean, Rodman had opened up something that, over the last couple times we've been down there that maybe we didn't see a lot before in that, the offshore standing timber deal, a lot of forward facing sonar, you
groups of
know,
fish.
but the rest of the body of water is very old school. I mean, you look at Rick Clunn's wins there. I mean, just rolling a spinnerbait by cover. I mean, and catching giants. Mark Menendez had a ton of success there flipping, throwing a spinnerbait. It allows you to do a lot of old school techniques. I think that's a main reason Mark Menendez has had success there. He's had a couple duds, mixed in, but overall, it suits him super well. And then bucket D, I want to say the percentage was pretty low when I picked him, 9.4, so not super, super low, but I will certainly take it. And I think Mark Menendez is going to have a big event here at the St. Johns River. Ronnie, who do you got?
You could call Mark Menendez the Crescent Lake Kid or the Crescent Lake Catcher. He's not really a kid anymore, but the Crescent Lake Catcher because he always seems to find a way to do that.
Every time.
In bucket D, I've got the first ever angler from the college series to make the elites, Brandon Card. He's got finishes like 34th, 37th, 26th. He's got a couple 100s in there, but those were early in his career, um, pre the river changing. You know what I'm saying? Pre the river changing, where there's a lot less eelgrass. We've gone here a lot more when it's been colder. Remember, pre 2016, the elite season didn't start till March. So we had never been to the St. Johns River really in February. Then we start coming in 2016, 2019. Those are when the February events started coming into play. And then we obviously had April last year. So Brandon Card, uh, overall rock solid. Finishes in the 19th, I think 19th a couple finishes ago, 28th, 37th, finishes like that. This is a good in between lake. I don't think Brandon has to deal with health problems anymore. That's been kind of lingering the last 2 years for him. He is all good, but I expect a bounce back season from him. Not bucket D worthy. There's a lot of guys in bucket D we expect to see higher. Just look at the top alphabetically. Card, Cherry, Christie, Cobb. Those are four guys I expect to be higher than they were last year in the points race. And then obviously Matt Robertson down in there, Bryant Smith down in there. You could pick a Brad Watley. I'm shocked to see Brad Watley at 3% after him getting second last year, him getting two top tens in the state of Florida last year. I think that he could be one that's like not a diamond in the rough, but like the snake that you're looking at and you're wondering if it's going to bite you, and then it bites you, and you're like, well, I should have known that. Well, Brad Watley's sitting right there at 3% with some good, tangible St. Johns River finishes. So I'm going Brandon Card, but there's a couple other guys you could definitely think about putting on your team when it comes to bucket D.
No question about it. Ronnie, who you got in bucket E?
Bucket E, I've got Jake Whitaker. Man, I mean, if I've said warming areas like canals will do well, who's the canal king at St. John's? I mean, it's been Whitaker. Whitaker's caught him in the canals above George. I think he's fished some canals below George. I think he's fished all over the place. But there's a couple key areas that he's always really found a way to outfish the competition around him and do well. I think he caught 8.5 pounder last year, or an 8 pounder last year on day one, and I think he was on camera going into day three, but didn't have the best day three. And so he finished, mid of the top 50 cut, like somewhere in the 25 to 35 range or something like that after a tough day three, but did well enough to be on camera. And that's something we say every single time with Whitaker is he always does well enough. 1% bucket E. He's going to be the bottom of the bottom. He is the last name in the last bucket alphabetically. So people are not going to scroll that far down. This is his style of fishing. This really is a place that he's done well, feels real comfortable doing it, and I'm not putting it past him to have another great finish here to start off his season strong. And we'll
So
be going to Okeechobee next, where the last time we were there, he had a top 10 for the elites. So this could be a great start to the season for Whitaker.
safe to say he's going to put that wacky worm around some
Oh,
big.
absolutely.
All right, I like it.
Absolutely.
I like it. So bucket E, I'm going with Bo Browning, as I already mentioned.
You got the top of the bucket. You got the top guy in the bucket, and I got the bottom guy alphabetically.
I was the lazy one, didn't want to scroll all the way
You
down,
didn't
and that
scroll.
went straight from the top. Bo is an incredibly good vibrating jig fisherman. Like has always been really good with the chatterbait, very similar to his dad. I'm gonna guess that he puts a lot of eggs in that basket, is able to just get bites doing that, whether it's offshore, like hard spots, that kind of deal, fishing up shallow. And then also he's much like his dad in the sense that like you look at Steven's career and he was always able to do well, especially any tournament where maximizing water is key, right? You know, you have an area and you make it last for what everything it's worth, right? That's just been an Arkansas staple thing. Kevin Shorts, all the guys, Scott Rooks, the guys from Arkansas that grew up fishing the Arkansas River, shallow water, like that's just a specialty of theirs. And I think that Bo's no different in that sense. Obviously, he's more than capable with his electronics. I think he's incredibly good at that. But at heart, he loves fishing shallow. You've fished with him, you know that. I mean, he can really fish shallow with the best of them. I think he's going to get off to a really good start, kind of like you already predicted. St. John's River, not a place he's got necessarily a ton of experience, but then, going straight to Okeechobee where he had a top 10 in open last year.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that he's gonna have a good start to the finish, and I'll take my buddy Bo and Bucket E.
And I
But
think it
Bucket
I
E,
think it helps that he's
Bucket E
got a
for,
good
for buddies, right? I mean, that's pretty much like the way we pick. Buddies are for Bucket E.
you're going to be really screwed when Atkins, Logan, and Bo Browning are all in bucket E or the bucket C. You're going to have a hard time. But um, yeah, and it helps that he's not all on his own as a rookie. He's got Easton Fothergill, his schoolmate from Montevallo, worked together on the opens last year, probably rooming together, working together once again to just break down these bodies of water that they maybe have never been to. So I'm confident they'll know something, whether it's the winning thing or it's something to survive on. They'll know something. We got 10 minutes left in the podcast. You got to go, and I'm still tired, so I'm gonna go too in 10 minutes. But let's get to Drain the Lake. Falcon Rods Drain the Lake. I set my team up like we talk about. You can go event by event and try to pick your 8 anglers. And at the end of the year, you could have 15 anglers with 8 spots left, and you're like, I should have balanced these out better. I already wrote down my whole 8-man lineup for all 10 events, counting the classic. So I feel pretty balanced overall on the 80 anglers I chose. I didn't choose any anglers that were specifically from the opens for the classic. So all 80 anglers I chose this season were of the Elite Series 104-person field. So starting off my Falcon Rods Drain the Lake. I've got one guy that duplicates with my Rapala lineup, and that's Brandon Card. Using Brandon Card here for both teams. You might say, well, if you're so confident in Whitaker, why not use him? I think I'm saving him for the Mississippi River later in the year. I think that could be his best finish. I think he'll have a good finish here, but I think his best finish could come there. So you're not just picking guys that'll do well here. You're trying to pick them on their best week of the season. So Brandon Card, I did go with two of those when I saw the warm, stable conditions overall, and we're not in a severe cold front, just a day and a half, 2 days of cold front. And then it gets back to temperatures that we like to see. I did pick Drew Benton and John Cox for Drain the Lake. So I've got two of the Florida staple guys that you'd want to pick. I'm going to save Cook for later in the season, but I've got David Gaston. That's a part of my first four. Card, Cox, Benton, and Gaston. I think David Gaston's style of fishing with a swim jig, bladed jig, maybe wacky rig, things like that. Jig flipping could do very well here. This kind of does suit his style. As a Coosa River guy, I feel like Coosa River guys do well in the St. Johns River, like Matt Herron, like Wes Logan, like we've talked about. Will Davis Jr. probably going to do well as well.
Canterbury.
Yes, exactly. And so Card, Gaston, Benton, and Cox are my first four.
Yeah, so I'm stacking mine pretty high on this first one. I usually almost always go, lighter roster and then just progressively build up. We're going guns blazing, boys. Okay, so I'm starting out first four. John Cruz, John Cox, Corey Johnston in the first tournament of the year,
Mm. No
and Logan.
No St. Lawrence on the schedule, so that
Yeah,
makes sense.
exactly.
Yeah.
No St. Lawrence. I mean, is he going to catch him at St. Clair? I'm sure. Is he going to catch him a lot of other places? Certainly. But I'm going to take my odds with the first tournament of the year, knowing it's a place he's had just abundant success. And I wanted to use one of the Johnson brothers. So John Cruz, John Cox, Corey Johnson, Logan Latuso is my first four.
Nice. I'm going to stick with the Logan Latuso theme, not picking him, but picking someone from down the street. I'm going Tyler Rivette, Matt Herron, Matty Wong, and Logan Parks. I kind of went a little soft, not saying these picks aren't good picks, but I did go maybe a little bit more conservative with my last four compared to having some of those guys with proven track records in the first four. But like we said, Herron, Coosa River type. I got two Coosa River guys. I got two Floridians in my 8 guy lineup. I've got a couple young guys. I think Matty Wong understands these fisheries a little bit better. He had some immediate success his rookie year here, but now he's seen it a couple times that he's a little bit more comfortable, probably. Logan Parks, I think that this isn't one that people would thumb him for being a competitor or factor, but I think that you could definitely pick him here and not be disappointed. So we'll see about that. So my 8 is Card, Gaston, Benton, Rivette, Herron, Matty Wong, John Cox, and Logan Parks.
I like it. My final four, a little bit of crossover for me. Got Mark Menendez, Brad Wiley, Drew Benton, and Scott Canterbury. Just talked
Okay.
about him a
Okay.
second ago. Coosa River guy, tends to do well there. Like I said, I'm swinging for the fences right out of the gates. I think it's going to be a good start, and hopefully can carry it on. I'll give my entire 8-man roster real quick. So John Cruz, John Cox, Corey Johnston, Logan Latuso, Mark Menendez, Brad Watley, Drew Benton, and Scott Canterbury.
Awesome. What's your winning weight? I've got my winning weight set at 84 pounds 3 ounces. I think it's going to be somewhere in between what we've seen in those April and those real warm February events that we have from like Corey last year with Clun in 2019. But then we've had some 77s, some 81s. I think it's just going to be somewhere in the middle there with the warming temps we've had. And then it will set back with some cold temps, but then maybe the back half of the tournament starts to get some heavier weight.
I'm pretty close to you. I'm at 86.10. Just a couple pounds heavier than you are. I think that, like you said, if I had to guess, I mean, I could easily see it being bigger. I mean, I could see the weight being higher than both of ours by no stretch would that surprise me. But like you said, I think somewhere in the mid 80s is probably where we're going to be at for this one if I had to put my best guess on.
We need to throw some stats out there as well. We've talked about this on different conference calls and things, but there is some trends to it. If we think about the big bass of the tournament or the big bass in general at the St. John's, whether they happen in the same year, we've got a couple from the same seasons here, 2014, 2019, but the biggest bass of all time weighed in at the St. John's for elite events, and then biggest bags and winning weights, things like that. Big bass, they happen on day 1 and 2. All of the 11. So I have 10. I try to do 10 fish catches for the things, but there's a tie at 10 pounds, 1 ounce. So I kept Clark Ream and Kyle Welcher in there. But the big bass, if you've caught a 10 plus pounder, they have happened on day one or day two of the event. Cruz in 19, Clifford Perch in 19. You had Davey Height, Justin Lucas in 2014, along with Greg Hackney, Cliff Crochet also that year. 2016 with Cliff Prince had a 10-8. I almost got to witness that one because I was following him in 2016. You've got Jason Williamson in 2011 and Clark Ream in 2011. And then Kyle Welcher, 2020, his 10-1 made the cut. So our 11 biggest bass of all time for the elites at the St. John's have happened on day one and day two of the events. Now, most of the big bags, I will say the second biggest bag all the way down through the 11th biggest bag. So basically 10 of the 15th biggest bags limits, the biggest limits have been on day three or day four. So you're looking at almost 75%, over 2/3 of the biggest bags of the St. John's history have happened on day three and day four. So keep an eye on those. And then winning weights, like we mentioned it, Paul Mueller's was just a 3-day event. That was 47 pounds. It would have been a lower weight anyways in 2020, probably a 60 to 65 pound winning weight. But everything else has been 75, 75, 77, 79, 81. And then we've got three that are 90, 93, and 98. So that 84, that 86, we think it'll be in the top 3 or 4 biggest winning weights we've had here for the Elite Series. So just some numbers to think about. Hackney has a couple of those. His 2 biggest bass he's ever caught in Elite Series competition has been at the St. John's. So great pick overall by you going with him. I'm gonna save Hackney. I'm gonna save Hackney a little bit. Some numbers to consider. You'll hear about those on Bass Live and the halftime show that Kyle will be hosting with Dave Mercer this year. Let's go into the last deal. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, but we've talked about Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing. We've talked about Falcon rods Drain the Lake. Now we're going into TH Marine Pick'em. You pick those 7 different categories, and you give 2 anglers, and you have to pick one or the other. So we've got 7 matchups. We already went through our picks, so we'll go again, though, real quick. Chris Johnston, Trey McKinney. I'm going Chris Johnston.
Same here, Chris Johnston.
Then we've
Matchup
got,
number 2.
oh, yeah, you go.
Yeah, we'll
We'll ping pong.
trade off here. Matchup number 2, Florida Showdown. John Cox versus Drew Benton. Who you got?
Drew Benton.
I got John Cox.
We got Jacob Fouts versus Robert G. 2 scopers. You said Battle of the Beards, but it's 2 scopers. I got Jacob Fouts.
I got Robert G. Moving on, matchup number 4, International Showdown. Taku Itu and Carl Jochimson. I got Taku. He's gonna find a way.
Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi. I got Carl. Next one, Patrick Walters and Justin Hamner, the roommates. 2 of the roommates. I got Patrick Walters.
I got Patrick Walters as well. Could be definitely a good matchup. Walters had a lot of success there. We'll see how it plays out. Matchup number 6, the previous 2 St. John's River champions. How about Corey Johnston versus John Cruz? I got John Cruz. Who you got?
Man, I want to waffle and flip, but I'm not. I picked Corey. We've had enough Corey in this show. Cruz is a past winner. He's had such a good track record here. Corey is just so dang good. Like I expect a good start from him. And then we've got the battle of the Tylers. 2 guys who made the top 10 at Lake Fork last year. Tyler Rivette, Tyler Williams. I'm going Tyler Rivette. And my Drain the Lake roster also says that.
Yeah, I'm going Tyler Rivette as well. So that will do it for our TH Marine.
So we match up with what do we? We match up with Rivette, Walters, and Chris Johnston, but we differ with the other 4 selections. So we'll see. Let's see how it goes. Prizes will be given out for all the fantasy lineups that do well in all 3 games. Thank you to TH Marine jumping in for the pick'em. This is very cool. Head to head. You only got 2 selections, 50-50 shot of getting it right. What if they tie, Kyle? What if we got 2 guys who tie? I mean, we're going to have to deal with that tiebreaker, and we're going to be mad someone is. But TH Marine with the pick'em, Falcon rods with Drain the Lake once again, and Rapala, a longtime partner of Fantasy Fishing and your 5-man bucket. So, Kyle, St. John's River chiming in quick this week. I will give you a sneak peek. Our 6 cameras day 1. Chris Johnston, former AOY last year. Brad Watley, great track record here. Uh,
Ready?
say that again. What did you say? Was that me? I was
No,
echoing.
there's a video playing in the
Oh, it's
background.
video. Oh, nice. Bassmaster.com audio video. Okay. Chris Johnston, Brad Watley, John Cruz, Greg Hackney, Kyle Welcher, and Easton Fothergill. We're going AOYs for opens and elites. We got a past winner here. We got some really good hammers like Welcher, Hackney, and Watley all looking for their win on the St. John's. So coverage starts Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm actually out, Kyle. I don't even know if I'm supposed to say this. I'm out till Sunday. Got to go coach my boys in regionals in Dallas. So hopefully we're bringing back a trophy against some of Texas's finest, and we'll go horns down all week long and bring it back to Woo Pig Suey State. Okay.
Works for me.
Awesome. For episode 191, I'm Ronnie Moore. That's Kyle Jesse. We will see you at the St. Johns River. Be on the lookout for updates about Ike, others, and it should be a great showdown to start the season.